How does someone learn how to earn respect from others to invest in them? What did you learn during that journey? I can't imagine that was easy because you don't always get it right the first time.
I think a lot of it comes down to the self-talk and how you view yourself, because ultimately others view you the way that you view yourself many times and the way that you think of yourself. I mean, don't get me wrong, like the people who are backing me, the ones who are believing in me, for everyone who did that, there are also 1,000 that didn't, right? So, but when I first went out to raise funding, I did 800 plus pitches. And out of those 800 plus, only one was a yes. So it's failing many times to get to that one success. But like to get people to believe in you, I think first of all you have to believe in yourself.
You are listening to Personalization Outbreak, a podcast about the collapse of traditional corporate standards in today's more personalized world. I'm Llopis. I'm a leadership strategist, author, contributor to Forbes, and founder of the Leadership in the Age of Personalization movement. On this show, I'm interviewing executives across multiple sectors to find out how the balance between standardization and personalization can exist. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Personalization Outbreak Podcast. Here's a question. Have you ever thought about how to explore the quest for career freedom, breaking away from those conventional norms that drive you crazy to discover limitless possibilities? Well, our guest today, Nellie Wartoft, she's amazing. And just wait till you get a sense of who she is, why she is who she is, and her professional mission that now spans across 32 countries. You see, Nelly is a Swedish technology entrepreneur who launched Tigerhall in 2019, revolutionizing how professionals actually learn from one another in the real world. Now, Tigerhall engages with Fortune 500 firms and is inspiring people throughout the world. Now, Nelly's going to share her strategies and insights on how to find freedom in your professional journey, empowering you to transcend the limitations of outdated standards and how to begin to embrace a path of boundaryless potential. So before we get started, please click the like button below, share it with your colleagues, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media at Llopis. Nelly, great to have you on the show. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Glenn. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here because on Personalization Outbreak, we look for people who are ready to unleash, and you have unleashed for a long time. In fact, before we go into your own journey of reinvention, please share how you started your journey, because it didn't start maybe the way you had hoped. In fact, I think it ignited where you are today.
Yeah, so I grew up in Sweden, in southern Sweden, in a small town, and I started working pretty early. Wanted to get out in the world and test my skills, and already at that point, I wanted to be limitless, and that's always been my greatest motivation throughout my entire journey. It's like, how can I be limitless? How can I have nobody else putting limits on me, like no boundaries to what I can do? Like, how can I just go for it and truly be limitless? So that's been a key driver for me throughout, and it was one of the key drivers that made me want to leave the town I grew up in and move away from Sweden and so on, and then also eventually start a couple of businesses and ultimately end up running Tigerhall. So that's always been the key motivation, and I wanted to always see like how far can I go? How far can I take this? Like how crazy can it get, if you will? And I have this strong sense that life is so incredibly short. Like I don't need to be another one that is chasing promotions and doing the corporate rat race and like being in that game. Like it's great that so many people are, but I felt like if I can do something different that has bigger impact, how can I set myself up to do that? So that
Well,
was
now,
very much what was going through my mind.
Well, but go a little deeper. I mean, you went through some adversity that really was the awakening for you.
Which adversity?
Well, that maybe where you grew up or the surroundings wasn't so conducive about unleashing yourself. It was more about promoting you to stay in a box. And when you saw that, you said, there's no way that I'm going to spend the rest of my life fitting in a box. And there was no box for you to fit in. Or did I misunderstand?
No, yeah, like I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't call it adversity. But it was, I think Sweden as a culture, was not really resonating with who I wanted to be. And Swedish values weren't really resonating with what I believed my values were. And an example of that is that in Swedish children's books, all the villains are always entrepreneurs. So in every single children book, you have a business owner, an entrepreneur, a banker. It's always someone who's viewed as capitalist, because that's ultimately the worst thing you can be in Sweden is being a capitalist. And that's always the villains. So I grew up in an environment that wasn't really encouraging that type of achievement. Sweden is encouraging, in my view, different achievements, whether it's in arts and music and sports, like those are still very appreciated. But building a big business is not really what people are proud of. And in fact, up until today, my mom still calls it social suicide to talk about me. So she doesn't want to tell her friends what I do. And the story is always like, yeah, she lives abroad. Like she lives abroad somewhere, because it would be social suicide to tell people that she's built her own business and runs a business that has employees in 12 countries and users in 32 countries, and this global business that would not be gelling well with Swedish values. And also my approach to work, like work ethic, like the way I perceive Sweden being around work is like it's usually pretty negative. It leads to work burnout, like don't work too hard. Like work is seen as something negative in your life. And I see work as something incredibly positive. It allows you to learn, it allows you to grow, you can push yourself, and it's something that I think should be valued. Whereas the conversation about work in Sweden is usually around how can we work less? You shouldn't work so many hours. You could get burnt out. How can we get to the 4-day work week? And I'm kind of like, where do we challenge ourselves as humanity? Like, how do we drive innovation? How do we push the next frontier? And like all of that comes usually through work, like whether it's in private enterprise or government or any type of sector, right? But working is what drives humanity forward. It's not lying on your couch and scrolling TikTok. So those are some areas that, yeah, didn't really sit right with my personal values, which also made me decide to go somewhere else.
That's what I was hoping for. And why is that? Because what you just shared is what I've learned, and I'm going to be kind, most people experience. Same story most people share, but it's just packaged differently. And in your case, the culture just didn't align with how you were wired. And you had to make a choice. And maybe you don't think it's adversity, but actually was, because you were in conflict. And when you're in conflict, you have to make a choice. And so I'm glad that you're seeing it not as adversity, because what you're saying is that I didn't stick around enough to let it bother me, but what it did is ignited me to pursue what I wanted to pursue. And I think this is part of finding freedom and part of what you were looking for. So let me zoom out a moment. So perceptually, and those watching on YouTube would probably agree with me, you come across as very successful. You're articulate. You founded a startup, a couple of them. You're backed by a great VC. But is this how you define your success?
No, no, it's not. And all of those accolades and resume items is not the way I define success. Because I think, first of all, that's a very, very dangerous way of defining success, because all of those things can be taken away from you. And if you tie your self-worth to your title or which VC is backing you or the money that you've raised or anything like that. That's a very, very dangerous game to play. And I personally think you're then setting yourself up for failure. So, and my definition of success is being limitless. Like that's all I've ever wanted. And that's all I ever want to have is just be limitless. My freedom and independence is very, very core to who I am and what I'm working for. And what I love about the life that I've designed is that I have this great freedom, but also the fact that I can decide and I can basically take it as far as I can. Like if I work hard enough, if I'm figuring the problems out that we're trying to solve, and like there are no limits being put on me. And that is what I define as freedom. And then you have all the other parts of being limitless from a like geographical location and like where I get to work from, the people I get to meet. But the core of all of that really is being limitless. And that's how I define my success is the fact that I live my life entirely on my own terms. I do exactly what I want to do. I am limitless and free in deciding what I can do. And I mean, yes, I work very hard, and there are limits, of course, to what I can do as well from a governance point of view. But it's something that has set me up to just like there is nothing that says I need to wait until I'm X age or have been here X time that prevents me from learning new things and growing as a person.
Let's break this down just a little bit. So you have people backing you financially. People obviously believe in you. And I'm sure there are people watching it or listening, and they're saying, well, I get that she feels limitless. And yes, she's finding her sense of freedom. But how did you earn that? And not just earn it, because it's not just earning it, forget financially. It's someone or a group of people believed enough in you to not only elevate your confidence about the direction that you are going, but also you now have a responsibility to over deliver. Because I know that you're not wired to just deliver. You want to over deliver. So what's the point? How does someone learn how to earn respect from others to invest in them? What did you learn during that journey? I can't imagine that was easy because you don't always get it right the first time. How did you learn that?
I think a lot of it comes down to the self-talk and how you view yourself, because ultimately others view you the way that you view yourself many times and the way that you think of yourself. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like the people who are backing me, the ones who are believing in me, for everyone who did that, there are also 1,000 that didn't, right? So, but those nobody sees and nobody talks about now. So, but when I first went out to raise funding, I did 800 plus pitches. And out of those 800 plus, only one was a yes. So that also shouldn't be forgotten, that a lot of this also comes down to hard work and numbers game and being everywhere and constantly doing it and trying, right? So it's failing many times to get to that one success. But like to get people to believe in you, I think first of all you have to believe in yourself. And I think that is where many people I see especially like fall short, because they do compare themselves to things where they look at their identity in a way that is not particularly helpful for believing in yourself. And who you are and how you talk to yourself and how you define your identity, I think is at the very core of it. And I've been thinking a lot about this because people always ask me, like, we have a podcast called Tiger Therapy, for example, that my colleague Pippa runs, and that's about self-doubt and how you overcome self-doubt. And she invited me after 2 seasons because I've never really felt self-doubt, and many people apparently do. But I've never really felt that I should doubt myself. And I don't think I am better than anyone else. I definitely don't believe that. But I also don't believe that anyone else is better than me. I think we're all pretty equal as human beings. And we operate pretty much in the same way. And we're much more similar than I think people think. So when you look at others and you identify as someone, I need to be this successful or I need to achieve that, and like comparing to this person, I think that is usually what sets people up for failure. And as an example, to make it very concrete, right? Like if you identify as I am the head of marketing at company X and I make this money and I live in this area. Then that's going to be challenging when you get laid off or some hardship happens or you might lose something out financially. That's going to be challenging, right? But if you identify as I am a resilient person and I have good intentions and I will always work as hard as I can and try my very best, then you're going to be able to overcome that. And for me, I identify as a resilient person. I see myself as resilient. I see myself as overcoming obstacles, and like that is who I am. So when I'm faced with adversity, I'm like, this is who I am. I was built to do this. So if everything was taken away from me tomorrow, and say I identified as a VC-backed startup CEO, and then suddenly the company goes bust, right? Then who would Nelly be? And that is a challenging position to be in. But now, if that would happen, touch wood, I would say I am probably the most resilient person I know, and this is what I was made for. I'm made to overcome hardship. So that shifts the way that you think of yourself in your mind and the way that you talk to yourself. And I think that is at the very core of how you then see yourself and believe in yourself. And that is going to make other people believe in you as well.
Well, it's a very good example that you gave about if someone identified you as a marketing person that lives here and has this. I mean, but this is society. I mean, we have depersonalized humans by doing what? By placing more value on what they have versus who they are. So just off the cuff here, Nelly, why do you think that people don't really know each other well enough?
Because I think people are focused on the wrong things and they want to get things that I think many times they don't even know themselves why they're trying to get. And then they spend their time on trying to get those things instead of what would actually be good for them. Like it's very well known, for example, that happiness is all about the quality of your relationships. That is ultimately what it comes down to, the quality of your relationships and the community that you're part of. How much of everyone who's listening, how much of your waking day are you spending on investing in the quality of your relationships? Today, how many percentage of your waking hours are going to investing in that? I guess single digits or zero. And even though we know research-wise and anecdotally that that is what makes us happy, we just don't spend time on it because we're chasing all of these other things.
Well, this is the whole point. And I think you said it best. When people don't know who they are, why would anything else but what they have matter? And I think this speaks to, and forgive me, it's the air conditioning in the studio that's making my eyes go awry. But my whole point is that this is something that you realized that you didn't need. You didn't need things. You needed who you were. And for whatever reason, you learned very early in life what you wanted and what you didn't want. And then you took what you had and you built on it by creating a brand and really taking a lot of risk to really discover the essence of who you are. And so why do I share that story? Because again, people might be listening to you and saying, oh, see, she's got it figured out, or she doesn't understand my world because I'm living in self-doubt. I'm living in fear. You know, is what she's saying real or not? And how can I really buy what she's selling? And I think you already have, is that you took many times in your life, you went out to discover more of who you already were. Is that a fair statement? And if it is, what would you advise someone else who's still trying to learn how not to just know themselves, but to trust themselves?
I'm a big believer in that strategy doesn't inform tactics, but tactics inform strategy. And that's my belief in business. Like, you don't sit and make a plan and then you go out and action it. No, you action a bunch of things, you learn from the data, you see what works, you test and try it, right? And then you take that back and you form a strategy. And I think it's the same for people. and finding your identity and who you are and what you value, you need to get out there. You need to try a bunch of things. But then I think where people go wrong, and this is my advice, is that I think people don't reflect enough. I think people spend way too little time thinking. And instead of sitting, like, for example, on flights, I many times just sit. Like, I don't watch a movie, I don't listen to something, I just sit on the flight and think. And I never see anyone else doing that on planes. Like, some people probably think I'm mentally ill for sitting there, like just watching into blank space. But I think people don't spend enough time thinking, reflecting, and learning. And people are very caught up in the emotional assessment of things. Like, how did that make me feel? And like, how do I feel in the moment without the ability to see themselves from a higher level? For example, when I get angry, I'm very much like, okay, like that's interesting. Like, why did I get so angry? Why did I get so pissed off? And then, for example, I hate when people tell me what to do. That is the worst thing I know, especially when it's something that I've already decided to do. And it can be as simple as my partner telling me, like, can you please turn on the music? I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking turn on the music. Like, who do you think you're like, I'm like, don't tell me what to do, right? But every time that happens, I stop and I think and I analyze, like, okay, that's interesting. Like, why did I get angry? And then it comes to like, okay, because it conflicts with my core value of independence. That is why I got angry. But I don't see people being as curious about their own emotions and their own experiences. I see them being more judgmental of themselves. And they're judging themselves and saying, I shouldn't be angry. Why am I angry? Why am I happy? Why am I sad? Like, why I should be more happy now. Why aren't I happy? And like, they just judge themselves over and over again. And that's not how you learn. That's not how you learn about yourself. Like, judging yourself is the last thing you should do, because the world is full of people who are not your friend anyway. So the very last thing you can do, very least, is to be your own best friend, right? So spend good amount of time with yourself and support yourself, but always analyze. And going back to the tactics informed strategy, put yourself out there and try different things. Like, I started working when I was 12. And that was to help stroke patients with their physical exercise. I started working at McDonald's when I was 14. And that taught me, like, hang on, like, I love the pace of commercial sales. And I love leadership. I love managing the kitchen staff and cashiers and plan this out. Like, it made me learn that this is actually what I like. Now, can we double down on that? And then I went into recruitment, which is also a very fast-paced commercial role. So it's all about putting yourself out there and trying. Like, I also did a lot of stuff that I absolutely hate. I mean, I played golf, and like I couldn't think of anything more boring than playing golf. So I was like, this is not for me. I don't enjoy this pace. Why am I out here walking for like 4 hours? It takes half of a Saturday. I don't enjoy it. So I think people need to put themselves out there more. And what I usually say is, like, you should be more of a proactive producer than a passive consumer. And I feel our entire society has fallen into being a passive consumer. Like, we love just lying down on the couch and scrolling TikTok and watching YouTube. And then we go into our Netflix subscription. And like, everything is just about consuming content. And that's not the way to test that. Like, you need to put yourself out there. You need to meet very different people. You need to try different things. You need to experiment and experience different things, and not just be a passive content consumer. But looking at how much time people spend on passively consuming content, it's ridiculous. And I'm not anti social media at all. Like, in fact, I love Instagram, and I think that's a great way to connect with my friends. But for example, I don't have a Netflix account, because getting stuck in a series and wasting 40 hours of my time would be like, I'm very scared of that. That would be like the death. I'm like, if I have 40 hours, I could spend that on building quality relationships, on experiencing things, on seeing new places. And I would rather do that than consuming a series. So, but I think you need to put yourself out there. And then, most importantly, when you put yourself out there, then evaluate. Like, okay, why did I like that? So for me, it wasn't like, oh, I love McDonald's because I love hamburgers. No, like that could be a reflection I could get to as well, right? No, but like, what did I like about it? Okay, I like the fast pace. I like the leadership aspect of it. I like the commercial aspect. So those were my three takeaways. And then where else can I apply that? Okay, would I enjoy running my own business? You know, like, so it's very step by step, but it starts by tactics.
I really like your personality. You are so you are so direct. And not just that, everything that you are saying, you actually believe yourself. which I
Yeah.
love. No, which I love. So let's go a little bit off the rails a little bit more, because I think this is important. So what you have basically said, without saying it, is that you love being accountable. You love being accountable.
Yeah.
You love it. And you love being accountable to your own direction and instruction. And yet, this is what most people don't want to be. They don't want to be accountable. So, I mean, this is why, I mean, people like you and me have become impatient with why things haven't changed in a way that respects humanity, that sees the value in the individual, rather than having to continue to abide by playbooks that were written years ago when literally everything was different. And then here you come, voila, with all of this confidence and directness because you have focus. What can you tell those people that they don't, it's not that they want to be like you, but they want to start taking the steps to be more accountable? Because isn't this the first step in getting to understand what your self-worth is? Because all our lives, we're accountable to everybody else's agenda and not our own.
Yeah, true.
What can you tell people? How could you encourage them? I know you said take a step, take this, do that. But for those that would rather watch Netflix rather than do something that maybe would be more, I mean, I'm sure they do that for their well-being as well. But given those that love to talk but don't act, what would you tell them? Tell them? And what's a small thing they can do to start understanding how empowering accountability can be?
I think there is one thing they need to understand. And if you are one of them listening, I'm going to tell you one thing. You are going to die. And let that sink in. You're going to die. You're not going to be here. And that's going to happen very, very soon. Like, you have a very short time on Earth, incredibly short time. And I always thought that I was going to die young because I always had this feeling like I'm going to die anytime. But like, life is so short. And I think that is what people have failed to internalize. That is why they're comfortable wasting time and doing things they're not happy about and putting up with everyone else's agenda and not really spending time figuring out what they want to do with their lives because they don't think that they're going to die. And that's the single realization that you need. And I haven't been in a near-death accident or anything like that. Like, you don't have to have been in a serious adversity health-wise or anything to realize this. Like, just think about it. And again, I think people don't think about death because it's uncomfortable to think about death. And that's what I would encourage everyone. Think more about death. Like, every day, spend time thinking about that you're going to die. And then think about what would you appreciate in comparison, right? Because I think a lot of people lack perspective. They entirely lack perspective. And they get so caught up in their day-to-day and chasing futile things. And I'm not saying it's not like certain things don't matter and other things do. Like, this is again completely up to you. Like, if you decide that designer handbags is what really matters to me, great for you, go for it. But then but don't chase that and then wake up 10, 20 years later realizing like, oh crap, I didn't spend enough time with my kids because I was chasing all of this money so I could buy my designer handbags. Figure out what is it that really motivates you. And that's also why, coming back to the Swedish culture of capitalists being the villains, right? Like, for me, it's never ever been about the money. And I've always been very clear about that. Like, I live on the same budget as I did when I was a student. I actually don't spend a lot of money at all because I know it doesn't make me happy. When I was working at McDonald's, I made a lot more money than my friends. I spent it all on I was shopping, I went to Ibiza, I did so many fancy things. And I was like, okay, that was fun, that was great, but it's not what truly drives me. So again, I tested it out. I tested out to be a shopaholic for 2-3 years, realized this is not for me, so let's dial it back. So again, tactics inform strategy. But thinking of death, I think, is the most powerful thing we can do. And because when you start thinking about it and just realizing how very, very short life is, then you start gaining some perspective and realize, like, do I really have to put up with these people's agendas that I don't agree with, or these things that conflict with my values, or like, life is too
Mm.
short for that crap.
You,
And
you
for
know,
example, I have a tattoo on my wrist called "Have Fun" because that is one of my core values. You need to have fun. So that's another thing. Like, it doesn't have to be super serious, but just know what you want to spend your life on, because your life is going to end very, very soon.
I want to make sure that I give a little bit more color to this thing around death. So I remember I was at a wedding. It was during the pandemic, and you could imagine the converse beyond the celebration. It was beautiful, but people were doing a lot of reflecting, as you've encouraged people to do. It's interesting how they haven't reflected as much after COVID. It's like we're back to our own ways, but um, so I grew up getting to know and hanging out with older people. My parents always encouraged that. That served me well. I'd actually recommend that to the kids. The kids of the parents that are listening, is that have your kids hang out with older people when they're younger. But what happened? I spent a half an hour with the priest. We're having a nice chat, and I said, "Father, when are people going to wake up to understand that things just can't remain the same?" And he said something very similar to what you said. He said, "Glenn, they'll wake up when they see more people dying, when they see
Mm.
more of the people that are in their life dying. It'll start giving them more perspective." And I can tell you that from that day, I've had 3 of my friends pass away. I've seen more than enough people uh, from my generation who were movie stars or athletes, people I grew up with watching, who have now passed away. So I get where you're going. And, I think that part of what most people don't do is they don't take the time to do what matters to them. And I understand why, because they've been so wired and conditioned to do what everybody else wants them to do that they forget or are completely out of touch about what matters to them. So on this point, let's talk a little bit about
Mm.
your generation. I mean, for those that can see you, they can probably see you're a little bit younger, just a little bit younger than I am. I'm joking, a lot.
Just a year or so.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's like I color my hair and, got this beard. And so I guess it did something for me. But anyway, if you would please take a moment, Nellie, to share your insights on the misinterpretations and misunderstandings that you believe prevail within your generation. And what is the opportunity here to change the narrative?
Yeah. So a lot of things that I feel are going wrong. And I do, and not blame is not the right word, but I do think the cause for much of this is social media. And I'm 32, so I'm a middle prime millennial. And we were probably one of the few generations to grow up without social media. Social media came when I was like 16, 17, and I started my Facebook account when I was like 16, 17. Instagram came when I was like 21, 22. So I wouldn't say my age were not as maybe damaged, if you will, as some of the people growing up now. But what I think is the problem, and social media is one of the reasons for it, or like adding fuel to the fire, if you will, is three things. The number one that I see being a massive issue is something called addition stress. And this is when people see my friends say, Anna, Lisa, Hannah. Like, Anna is very fit. Lisa has a perfect family, and Hannah is traveling the world, let's say. Suddenly, I think unconsciously that everyone in the world is very fit, has the perfect family, and is traveling the world. Because you can't actually see that Anna has no money, Lisa cannot travel, and Hannah does not know what to do in life, for example. Like, you don't see that. So people always fail to see what people have and don't have, and they fail to see the sacrifices that people make. And when you see all of these three people being perfect, you suddenly think that that's the same person. And this is psychologically proven. This is something that is happening in our minds. So I think that's a big problem. And then the other thing I see is that people think that if they're not happy, it's something wrong. So you should be happy all the time. And if you're not happy, there must be a diagnosis. There must be a problem with you. This is a problem to fix. And that's a big misunderstanding in my view, because you're not supposed to be happy all the time. Like humans are actually not made to be happy. There's some really interesting research on this, that humans are actually made for progress. We're made for change, even though like people hate change, and this I'll talk about change and transformation, how much people hate it. But we're actually made for progress. We're not made to be happy and idle and like fat and happy and just like complacent, right? Like that's not what we're built for. But people somehow think that if they're not happy and everything's perfect, they need to fix it. And of course, there's a lot of like very real mental illness, and I'm not discounting that. But I think a big part of this increase is also people just thinking that, oh, I shouldn't be sad. And for me, life is about experiencing all the dimensions, right? All the colors of the spectrum. So many times when I'm very sad and down, I actually feel very, like, happy is the wrong word, but like content and satisfied, because I'm experiencing life and I'm experiencing emotions. I'm experiencing up and down. And that's so much better than some kind of like middle, happy, average state of contentment that I see many people striving for. So I think people need to enjoy the downs as well, and like just not think that they are supposed to be happy all the time. And then the third problem I see is that people are just not fucking willing to work hard. Excuse my language, but like people are so thinking that they can get everything without sacrifice anything. And I think this, again, the first two lead into that. So everyone else has everything, and why am I not happy? And I should get everything without sacrificing anything. And I shouldn't have to give up my work-life balance, and I shouldn't have to give up everything that I want or everything that I think I want for something that I truly want, or similar. Like people don't have this mindset of compromising and making sacrifices and trade-offs. People always think that I can have everything, and they don't see, again, coming back to point one, they don't see the trade-offs that other people make. For example, I've made very big trade-offs for my limitlessness, right? Like, for example, I'm very far from my family. I meet my mom once or twice a year. I'm not happy about that. Like I would love to meet her much more often. And that's a very severe, big trade-off that I've made, right? But I've made it consciously. And I've made it conscious that I'm going to be away from my family. I'm going to compromise by FaceTiming them, or I need to visit like once or twice a year, and like they can come and visit me and stuff like that. But that's something that people don't see. And the same then when someone might have chosen the opposite, like they live very close to the family, they might not have the same career opportunities as someone that moved to a bigger city and similar. So people not appreciating and understanding trade-offs, I see being a big problem as well. Because if you don't see them, if you don't appreciate them, then you don't understand how to make them. And if you don't make trade-offs, you're not going to get to what you want to get to either. So I think those are the top three. And I think social media is not the cause of it, but it's accelerating it and putting fuel on that fire, especially for the first two, when you see everyone is happy, everything is perfect, and everyone has everything, which is truly not the case.
You know what I've learned about you? I've learned that you practice what I call circular vision. You have this ability to see around, beneath, and beyond what we seek in life. You have this very interesting ability to capture the macro and micro simultaneously. I'm sure no one's ever said that to you, because I actually created that term, circular vision, and you actually have it. And what you're saying is that people live linear lives. And what you're advising people is linear isn't going to give you happiness. Linear isn't going to give you what you want. You have to start practicing circular vision. And you've literally done that, not just in the way you think, but how you've traveled the world and really tried to expand yourself. And I think this is what the main message is today, is for people to find what they're looking for, being limitless, finding freedom. you have to learn how to expand yourself. And that begins with knowing yourself. It begins with discovering who the heck you are, and then start in that pursuit, knowing that it's going to require you to face your truth. And that's what I take away. How does that? How's that for a quick wrap up?
I think that sounds like a pretty good summary, pretty good wrap up. And what I would add to that is also to not overthink it. I think many people, they spin themselves around and go crazy over this, like, I need to find my true passion and find who I am and this and that. Like, passion is something that I think is a terrible advice. Like, don't follow your passion. Like, because that, like, keep it as a hobby, but like professionally, don't follow your passion. And I also think passion is a terrible word, because like, how do you define passion? Is it something you like? Is it something you love? Like, what does it mean to be passionate? So I think that entire advice is out. But I think, like, yeah, not overthinking it. And because at the end of the day, like, you're such a tiny, 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 tiny human out of so many humans in the world, and you are going to die soon. So also just spend this time having a bit of fun and like not overthinking it, and trying to really get to like the core of who you are. Like, I really believe in just like putting yourself out there, and the tactics before strategy, as I mentioned, and like seeing what happens, but also not taking yourself too seriously in the process and thinking you need to like discover everything about you today. Like, just enjoy life as well. But to and define what enjoy life is. Like, enjoy life to me is not watching Netflix, right? Like, that's not enjoying life, but actually like trying different things, seeing the world, meeting different people, like, and define how you enjoy it. But also don't take yourself too seriously and overthink it.
So, on that note, let's wrap it up with one last question. Now, you work with Fortune 500 organizations, you deal a lot with corporate America. So, you've seen and have experienced what the life of large institutions entails. Why do you think it's so hard for these large enterprises to drive change and transformation? What's holding them back? I mean, is it very similar to the things you've already shared with us, or is there something else?
So I think it's interesting, and this is why I love working in this space, because a lot of this actually comes down to identity, in my view. So what we spoke about, how you identify yourself and how you view yourself and your self-talk, that also applies to organizations. And if you how you categorize yourself, like, we are selling cornflakes, for example, like, is that how you identify? Then it's going to be very, very hard to stop selling cornflakes. But if you identify yourself as, we're going to put the most tasteful breakfasts in front of our consumers, that's a whole different way of identifying and positioning yourself, right? So the identity work comes back with organizations as well. And a big piece of our work is around that. How do you change mindsets? How do you change behaviors? How do you change the way people think about it, to drive that change and transformation? So I think that's a big part of it, the change in identity. I also think there's massive amounts of fear, in especially senior leaders in corporate America. They're so scared. It's a lot of big egos, and that's probably a whole podcast episode we could get into on that, and how to change that narrative. And then I think overall it's a lot of keeping up with different demands for, like, you have Wall Street on one end and employees on the other end, and sometimes they don't align. And there's a lot of talk about stakeholder capitalism and looking at all the stakeholders, but actually what most companies practice are, at the end of the day, shareholder capitalism. And I think that's fine, but just be transparent about it. Just be honest. And I think this lack of transparency, lack of, again, like a little bit, who are you? Like, who are you and how do you make your decisions and what do you believe in? That's as true for organizations as it is for individuals. And when organizations try and play two games, like, oh, we're for the betterment of the world and we're going to save the environment and this and that, but then all they talk about in board meetings is, how do we increase the share price? That's not going to be like, and it's fine to just talk about share price, but just say that you are what you are, right? Like, just have that transparency. So I think many of these themes that we've spoken about today and that are true for individuals also actually ring very true for large organizations.
Nelly, you're special, and I really enjoyed getting to know you, spending some quality time with you, and I really appreciate how you just let it all out. And let's see what people will do with it. I found it to be very valuable, and I'm sure our guests will too. But thank you so much for your time, and I wish you nothing but the best. And let's stay in touch.
Thank you. Likewise. And you're such a great host. Thanks a lot for having this conversation with me.
No, thank you, Nelly. Thank you. Well, as we learned from Nelly today, when you lead in the age of personalization, you will see things that others don't, do what others won't, and keep pushing when prudence says quit. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening to Personalization Outbreak. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. If you enjoyed the content, visit ageofpersonalization.com to check out our free streaming video series and learn how to get involved in the movement. I'm Llopis. I wish you a good day, and remember, without strategy, change is merely substitution, not evolution.